The ride begins. It was the kind of night that made your skin crawl. Cold, wet, and silent. The wind howled across the dark stretch of Archer Avenue, its voice threading through the trees like a warning. Fog hugged the ground in thick rolls, making the road ahead shimmer and disappear into nothingness. The amber glow of the street lamps fought to pierce through the mist but failed. Even the moon seemed to hide, as if afraid of what might be watching from below. Jake Sullivan drove with the windows up, heater low, radio off. He had finished a long shift at the stockyard on the southwest side of Chicago, exhausted. Clothes damp from the mist, the smell of iron and diesel clinging to his jacket. His hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. The road ahead was empty. At this hour, Archer Avenue had a way of making people feel like the last human on Earth. He had driven this road many times before, but tonight felt different, heavy, still. Jake squinted through the windshield as he passed the gates of Resurrection Cemetery, an old, iron-barred landmark nestled in the shadows. The sign creaked in the wind. Just beyond, headstones jutted from the darkness like teeth. He looked away quickly. That's when he saw her, standing on the right side of the road, barefoot, dressed in white. She raised one arm slowly, her thumb out. Jake's heart skipped. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way she stood so perfectly still, like a statue. Maybe it was the white dress that clung to her frame, damp from the mist, old-fashioned like something from another era. Or maybe it was just the fact that no one should be walking here, at this hour, in that kind of weather. But she looked young, lost, and alone. He slowed down, against his better judgment, pulling over beside her. She didn't move until he rolled the window down. "Need a ride?" he called out, his voice cracking just a bit. She leaned forward. Her face was pale, almost glowing under the dim light of the street lamp. Her eyes, a soft gray blue, stared into his for a long second before she nodded. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Just down Archer," she said, voice almost a whisper, "near the cemetery." Jake frowned. "You mean Resurrection?" She didn't answer, just opened the car door and slid inside. Her skin was cold, he noticed immediately. Not just cold from the weather cold. Her presence dropped the temperature in the entire car. The heater whirred louder, struggling. A faint scent followed her, not perfume. Something else, earthy, sweet. Old roses, maybe. He glanced sideways. She sat perfectly still, hands folded on her lap, eyes fixed straight ahead. No seatbelt, no shoes. Jake swallowed hard, trying to ignore the goosebumps that crawled up his arms. So, what were you doing out there?" He tried to keep his tone light. "Just needed a ride," she said softly. "I was at a dance." "A dance? At this hour?" She nodded but didn't elaborate. Jake forced a chuckle. "Kinda dangerous out here, you know? Not exactly a place for late-night strolls." She didn't smile, didn't respond. They drove in silence for a while. The only sound was the rhythmic squeak of the windshield wipers, and the occasional whisper of wind against the glass. The mist thickened. Headlights revealed nothing but fog ahead. Time seemed to stretch. Jake's nerves began to fray. Every instinct told him something was off. "What's your name?" he finally asked. She turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "Mary," she said. Jake's throat tightened. The name echoed in his head. Mary. Where had he heard it before? Suddenly, he remembered something. A story, a legend. One of those late-night ghost tales they used to tell around campfires when they were teens. A girl in white, seen on Archer Avenue, asking for rides, and then vanishing. No, that was just a myth. A local urban legend. Wasn't it? He looked at her again. She looked so real, so alive. But her clothes, that dress, it shimmered strangely under the dashboard light, like it belonged to another time. His pulse quickened. "So Mary," he said slowly, "where exactly do you want me to drop you off?" She pointed ahead, just a bit further, near the gate. He followed her finger. They were coming up to the front of Resurrection Cemetery. The gate loomed out of the fog, wrought iron black, twisted into Gothic patterns. It was closed, padlocked as always. Jake eased the car toward the curb. "You sure someone's meeting you here?" No answer. He turned to look at her, but she was gone. The seat was empty. His breath caught in his throat. Hands shaking, he pulled the car to a complete stop, heart pounding in his chest like a drum. He looked around. Nothing. Not a sound. He opened the door slowly and stepped out into the cold. "Mary," he called. No reply. Only the wind. Only the fog. The back seat door hadn't opened. He never heard it. She couldn't have gotten out. He turned, looked inside the car again. Still empty. He backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the cemetery gate. His breath hung in the air. Behind the bars, the graveyard stretched into darkness, silent and endless. Jake stood there for a long minute listening, watching. Then, without another word, he climbed back into his car and drove away, not daring to look back. The next morning, Jake told his story to a co-worker. They laughed, said he was overtired, maybe even drunk. But Jake knew what he saw, or didn't see. He searched online, typed in the words, "Mary Archer Avenue Ghost," and there it was. Dozens of accounts, stories stretching back decades, all nearly identical. A young woman in a white dress, seen late at night, always barefoot, always cold to the touch, always asking for a ride near Archer Avenue, always disappearing near the gates of Resurrection Cemetery. The locals called her Resurrection Mary. No one knew who she really was, but legend had it, she died in the 1930s. Some said she was killed in a hit-and-run after a dance at the old ballroom. Others claimed she was buried alive, her spirit never at peace. Whatever the truth was, she was still walking, still hitching rides, and Jake had met her. He never drove that road again at night, but sometimes when the fog rolls in thick and heavy, and the wind wails down Archer Avenue, some drivers say they still see her, just standing there, waiting, cold in the car. The moment she closed the door, the temperature dropped, not gradually, not like when you crack a window open on a cold night. This was sudden, like stepping into a freezer. Jake Sullivan felt it instantly. The air inside the car shifted from comfortably warm to biting cold. A chill crawled across his arms and neck, making the hair stand on end. The heater, which had been humming steadily, seemed to fade into silence. The defroster's warm breeze no longer reached his fingers. He reached for the dial, turned the heat all the way up. Nothing changed. The girl in the passenger seat sat silently, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes fixed forward. She hadn't said a word since she gave her name. Mary. Just Mary. Jake stole a glance at her. She didn't shiver, didn't react to the cold at all. Her skin looked almost translucent in the dim dashboard light. Her lips, pale and still. Her dress white, laced at the collar clung damply to her frame, but she showed no discomfort. She looked perfectly calm. Too calm. Jake rubbed his hands together and forced a smile, trying to ignore the building tension in his gut. "You cold?" he asked, glancing sideways. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes remained locked on the road ahead. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward him. "Not anymore," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, flat, emotionless. Jake chuckled nervously. "Well, lucky you. I feel like I just drove into a meat locker." Still no smile. Still no blink. Her eyes toast strange. Cloudy blue-gray eyes stared at him for a moment too long before turning forward again. Jake tightened his grip on the wheel. His mouth was dry. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 1:13 a.m. The cemetery was still about 10 minutes away. The longer he drove, the more uneasy he felt. The silence was pressing in. Not the kind of silence you choose. The kind that settles into your bones like fog. He could hear everything: his own breath, the faint creak of the leather seat when he shifted, the soft tick of the turn signal as he passed a side street, and beneath it all, something else. A hum. Low. Barely audible. Almost like humming. Was she humming? He turned his head slightly. Her lips weren't moving. The sound was coming from somewhere deeper. Somewhere behind her presence. He swallowed hard. "Are you from around here?" he asked, trying to break the silence. "A long time ago," she replied. Another strange answer. He stared out the windshield, trying to make sense of her words, trying not to look directly at her anymore. But it was hard not to. Something about her drew his eyes, like gravity. Then, without warning, the windows fogged over. All at once. Jake blinked in surprise. The windshield, the side windows, even the rear glass clouded up with condensation. Like someone had exhaled across every surface at the same time. He flipped the defroster again. Max heat. Nothing. He wiped a small circle with the back of his hand, just enough to see the road. "Sorry about the heater," he muttered, his voice shaky. "This car's seen better days." Mary didn't respond, and she still hadn't blinked. Jake's chest grew tight. He couldn't explain it, but he felt like something was watching him even when he wasn't looking directly at her. The kind of feeling you get when you walk through a dark alley, and every shadow feels alive. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something strange. The mirror. His rearview mirror had a perfect view of the back seat. It was empty, but she hadn't gotten out. She was still sitting in the passenger seat. He could see her clearly. He could feel her cold presence beside him. But in the mirror, nothing. No reflection. Jake's stomach turned. He blinked, leaned slightly to double-check. Still empty. Still just the back seat. He dared to look directly at her again. She was staring at him now. Not at the road. At him. Her eyes were wide and glassy, unmoving, unblinking. Jake gasped softly and gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. "You okay?" he asked, forcing the words out. Mary smiled. It wasn't comforting. It was small, tight-lipped, almost knowing. Jake looked back at the road, trying to pretend nothing was happening. But something was happening. The hum returned louder now, almost like a choir echoing faintly through a tunnel. He realized what it was. Singing. Faint voices, like a hymn, distant, muffled, but undeniably there. He skinned the radio. It was off. All the buttons were off. Still the voices came. He glanced at her again. Her lips weren't moving. The humming grew stronger, and with it, the cold. Frost bloomed across the inside of the windshield like spiderwebs. Jake reached to wipe it, but his fingers stung from the cold. It felt like ice had settled under his skin. And then, a whisper. "Do you believe in death, Jake?" He froze. His eyes darted to her. He hadn't told her his name. "W what?" She turned to him, slowly, eyes still wide, her voice low and distant. "Do you believe in death?" Jake's throat was dry. "To mean yeah, I guess. I don't really think about it." Her head tilted slightly. "You should." Silence. Thick, unbearable. Jake's heart pounded in his ears. She stared forward again. And just as suddenly as the frost had vanished, the temperature in the car warmed slightly. The fog lifted from the windows. The heater started working again, humming to life like it had never failed. He dared another glance at her. She was calm, serene, but something had changed in her face. Her skin looked less pale, her presence lighter. Maybe it was a trick of the mind. Maybe it was exhaustion. Jake took a deep breath and forced a chuckle. "You really know how to spook a guy, you know that." She didn't laugh, just whispered, "Not yet." Goosebumps erupted across his entire body. She turned her head slightly, looked out the window. "We're almost there," she said. Jake looked ahead. The cemetery gate was approaching, tall, black, and still padlocked. Beyond it, The gravestones stood like sentinels in the fog. He slowed the car to a crawl. "Here?" he asked, his voice unsteady. She nodded. He pulled to the side of the road and turned on his hazard lights. "You want me to wait with you? It's still late and—" He turned. Her seat was empty. Again. His mouth fell open. She was gone. No door sound. No movement. Nothing. Just the faint smell of roses, and the lingering cold on the leather seat. Jake leapt out of the car and looked around. Fog swirled under the street lamps. The iron gates loomed tall and locked. No figure. No footprints. Just silence. He turned in slow circles, heart hammering in his chest. She'd disappeared. Just like before. Jake drove home that night in silence. The heater worked fine. The windows never fogged. But something had changed. He kept replaying her words in his head. "Do you believe in death, Jake?" He hadn't told her his name. He never would forget that. When he reached his apartment, he checked every mirror in the place. He didn't know what he was looking for. Maybe he just wanted proof that he was still real, still alive, still himself. He poured a glass of water, sat down at the kitchen table, and turned on his laptop. He typed, "Resurrection Mary, real story?" And there it was again. Reports from as early as the 1930s. Same stretch of road, same dress, same vanishing. And one thing that many of the stories shared: she never blinked. Not once. Vanished at the gates. Jake had never felt more relieved to see the gates of Resurrection Cemetery. Their iron bars rose like black spears against the mist, forming a boundary between the living and the dead. The lights on Archer Avenue glinted faintly off the rusted metal. The cemetery stretched beyond the gate into a vast shadowy field, where gravestones peeked out like jagged bones. Jake slowed the car. Mary, sitting in the passenger seat, was watching the gate intently. Her body was still, her hands clasped gently in her lap. She hadn't spoken since the temperature dropped, since the strange fog inside the car, since that unshakable question: "Do you believe in death, Jake?" He couldn't shake it, couldn't forget that she had said his name. He never told her his name. Jake cleared his throat. "You said this is your stop." She turned her head slowly toward him. Her expression was calm, almost sad. Her eyes, still glassy and pale, held something unspoken. "This is close enough," she said softly. "Just up ahead, by the gates." Jake hesitated, scanning the cemetery entrance. "You sure someone's meeting you here?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked back out the window, her voice lower than before. "I never make it past the gate." Jake's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" But she didn't respond. They were now just a few yards from the entrance. A single lamp flickered near the gates, casting long, crooked shadows across the pavement. Fog curled upward like smoke, drifting through the bars of the cemetery fence and spilling onto the road. Jake pulled over, tires crunching softly over damp gravel. "All right, I'll walk you to the gate if you want," he offered. "It's not safe out here alone." Mary didn't reply. Jake shifted the car into park, then turned toward her. Her seat was empty. Jake froze. The passenger door hadn't opened. There was no sound, no movement. She was just gone. Vanished. Gone in the time it took him to turn his head. His breath hitched in his chest. He blinked rapidly, heart thundering in his ears. He looked around in every direction, hands gripping the wheel like a lifeline. The only thing he saw was fog. Thick, gray, swirling fog. "Mary," he whispered. Silence. He flung the door open and stepped out into the night air, which felt even colder now than it had inside the car. A chill ran down his spine as the wind picked up, making the branches nearby rattle like bones in the dark. He circled the car. No footprints, no sound of movement, no one walking away. The ground was soft with moisture. If she'd gotten out, she would have left something. A sign. A track. Nothing. It was as though she had never been there. Jake stood still, staring at the cemetery gates. The rusted iron loomed above him. Beyond it, shadows stretched endlessly between headstones, the air growing still and heavy. Then he noticed something strange. The gate. There, pressed against the iron bars were smudges. Faint, foggy impressions. He leaned closer. They looked like handprints. Small, delicate palms. Fingers slightly curled, as if someone had pressed their hands against the gate, and then disappeared into it. Jake took a shaky step back. Was it her? Did she walk through it? Or had she never left? He looked up at the gates again. They hadn't opened in years, locked tight with a heavy chain. He walked closer, curiosity fighting fear. The smudges on the gate began to frost over. He reached out, hesitated, then touched the cold metal. Ice bit into his skin. He pulled his hand back with a hiss. Then he heard it. A whisper. Soft. Female. Calling his name. Jake. He turned quickly, scanning the area, heart in his throat. Mary. No answer. Only the wind and then the quiet hum of the car engine behind him. Jake slowly backed away from the cemetery gate and got into the car, locking the doors automatically. He stared at the empty seat next to him for a long time. It still held a faint imprint, as if someone had just been there. He reached out, cautiously, and touched it. Cold. He put the car into drive and pulled away from the gate, glancing one last time into the rearview mirror. Still nothing in the seat, but for just a second as the cemetery disappeared behind him, thought he saw movement among the gravestones. A flash of white, a figure, standing perfectly still, watching him. The next day, Jake couldn't stop thinking about it. He barely slept. He scoured the internet again, this time going deeper. Local legends, archived news, old blog posts, everything about the stretch of Archer Avenue, and the ghostly figure people claimed to see. Resurrection Mary, they called her. The stories were eerily similar, consistent, spread over decades. Men picking up a girl on the side of the road, always on foggy nights, always dressed in white, always barefoot. Some said she asked to be dropped off at the cemetery gates. Others claimed she danced at a local ballroom, then disappeared into thin air. A few reports even mentioned frost on the windows or voices whispering from nowhere. Jake's encounter wasn't unique, but it felt personal. He had heard his name, felt her presence, seen her vanish. He needed answers. That evening, he returned. He waited until after midnight and drove the same route, parking his car in the same spot near Resurrection Cemetery. This time, he brought a flashlight and a voice recorder. He stood at the gate again. The same fog, the same cold, the same silence. He turned on the recorder, holding it close to his mouth. "This is Jake Sullivan. I was here last night. I gave a ride to someone named Mary. I think she's the spirit they talk about in all these stories." He paused, waiting. Nothing. Then he stepped closer to the gate. "Mary, if you're here, I just want to understand. I want to help." A long silence. Then, faintly, the flashlight flickered. The wind kicked up, and from the graveyard, something stirred. A shadow moved between the stones, slow, graceful. Then came the voice, not loud, not threatening, just soft and sad. Why didn't he come back? Jake's blood ran cold. The flashlight slipped slightly in his hand. "Who?" he whispered. The voice repeated, "Why didn't he come back?" The words echoed through the trees. Jake looked into the cemetery, but saw nothing. Only fog. Only gravestones. He stepped back, heart pounding. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a ghost. It was a memory, a fragment, a loop playing again and again, her final thoughts, her final night. Stuck in time. Jake left the cemetery shaken but driven. He needed to know more. About her. About who she was before she was a ghost. Was she real? Was she ever buried here? The answers had to be somewhere. In the city records, in old police reports, in obituaries from a forgotten decade. Jake didn't realize it yet, but his encounter was only the beginning. He hadn't been haunted. He had been invited. And Resurrection Mary? She wasn't done with him yet. The legend spreads. Jake wasn't the first. He wouldn't be the last. By the time he returned home from his second late-night visit to Resurrection Cemetery, he felt like he was part of something far bigger, some web of sightings, whispers, and warnings that had spanned generations. And when he began asking questions, people started answering. Locals, elders, bartenders, taxi drivers, and even priests. And every single story had the same thread-on figure. One road, one mystery. They called her Resurrection Mary. It started with a mechanic named Luis who worked out of a garage a few blocks from Archer Avenue. Jake went there to get his tires checked, but ended up getting far more. Luis had grease-stained fingers and tired eyes, but when Jake mentioned Mary, he stopped mid-sentence. "You saw her?" he asked. Jake nodded. Luis exhaled, wiped his hands with a rag, then pulled up a worn metal stool. "I've seen her too," he said. "Twice." Jake leaned in, heart racing. Luis began. "First time was about 10 years ago. I was driving my dad's old Chevy truck home from a late shift. Rain was coming down hard. I saw a girl walking barefoot, soaked, wearing this white dress, like it was from a wedding or a funeral or something." He paused. "She looked so lost. I pulled over, asked if she needed help. She didn't speak, just got in the cab, sat quietly." Jake didn't interrupt. It was already too familiar. Luis continued. "She told me to drop her off near Resurrection Cemetery. When I pulled up, she said thank you, looked right at me, and then she was gone. Just gone. Door didn't open. Seat was cold again, like she'd never been there." Luis rubbed his arms, as if remembering the chill. Jake asked, "You ever tell anyone? Who'd believe me? My brother still thinks I fell asleep or imagined it. But I know what I saw." Jake left that garage with more questions than answers, but also with a strange kind of comfort. He wasn't alone. The next few weeks, Jake dove deep into the story of Resurrection Mary. He printed newspaper clippings, copied blog posts, visited local history forums. The name kept appearing, sometimes in bold headlines. "Ghostly girl seen along Archer Avenue again." Other times in quiet, handwritten notes taped to church bulletin boards or posted on community corkboards and diners. "Saw her again last night. Foggy. She looked right at me. Her eyes not normal." One post from a 1999 message board caught his attention. "My grandfather swore he danced with her in the 1940s, at the old ballroom. Said she was the most beautiful woman in the room. But when he went to get her a drink and came back, everyone said no one had seen her at all. The floor where they danced was cold as ice." Another post, more recent. "Ride-sharing driver here. Picked up a girl in white near Willow Springs Road. She asked to be dropped at Resurrection. Vanished before I could turn around." The pattern was clear. Different decades, different drivers, same girl, same road, same destination, same vanishing act. Jake began mapping it literally. He drew a route from the old ballroom that once stood at 47th and Mozart, now a parking lot, to Resurrection Cemetery. Then he began plotting the sightings. Every single one fell along that path, as if she was following the same route over and over again. Trapped in it, word began to spread that Jake was looking into Mary. At first, it was just strange glances at the diner. Then, more openly, a retired bus driver named Carl approached him one morning. "You're the one chasing Mary, right?" Jake nodded, surprised. Carl pulled out an old Polaroid. 1965. Night route. "I snapped this on instinct. Thought I saw something by the cemetery gate." The photo was grainy, but in the mist there was a faint figure. White, feminine, barefoot, half faded. Jake stared at it in silence. Carl added, "I've seen a lot in this city, son. But that was not normal. Never drove that route again." Even the police, off the record, acknowledged something was going on. Jake met with a retired officer who once patrolled the Archer stretch during the 80s. "I had at least 5 calls in my time," the man said. "Always the same, woman in white. Vanishes near the gates." We chalked it up to local hysteria. But every one of those witnesses, sober, no history of hallucinations. Some were priests. One was a judge. Jake asked him, "You ever see her yourself?" The old officer paused, then answered, "Yes, once. Halloween night. Thought it was a prank. I turned the spotlight on her, but she didn't flinch. Then she just wasn't there anymore." He stared out the window as if still trying to explain it to himself. "She didn't walk away, she dissolved." Jake kept digging. At the Chicago Historical Society, he found a 1934 article from the Chicago Tribune. The headline read, "Young woman killed in auto accident after dance at O'Henry Ballroom." A photo of the victim was included. Her name, Mary Bregovy. She was 21. She had been at the ballroom with friends the night she died. She left early, reportedly upset, and was later struck by a car on Archer Avenue. The driver was never found. Jake stared at her photograph for a long time. It wasn't crystal clear, but something in her facious softness in the eyes. The curve of the mouth matched what he remembered in his passenger seat. Could it be her? Mary, the real Mary. Her body was buried at Resurrection Cemetery. Jake felt a chill creep down his spine. The story was lining up to perfectly. What if her spirit never left? What if she never made it home that night? Soon, people began approaching Jake unprompted. A waitress at the diner told him her uncle saw the girl in white back in the 1970s. A librarian showed him a local ghost book that featured Mary's story as one of the top 10 haunts of Chicago. A musician claimed to have recorded strange static while playing a late gig at a nearby venue. He swore the noise formed the words, "I'm still here." It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a living myth, and the city seemed to know it. Then, one night, something changed. Jake got an anonymous letter in the mail. No return address, just a typed note on plain paper. "She's looking for something, or someone, and she'll keep writing until she finds it." Jake flipped the paper over. Nothing on the back, no clue who sent it. But he couldn't stop thinking about the line. "She'll keep writing." Was that what this was? Not a haunting, a search. Jake returned to the cemetery once more. This time, he brought flowers. He placed them at the gate. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions. He simply waited. The fog thickened. The wind died down. Then came the voice, soft, distant. This time, it said only one thing. "Thank you." Jake turned. No one was there. But the cold faded. The air warmed slightly. And for the first time in weeks, he felt peace. If only for a moment. Digging through records. The story of resurrection Mary had always lived in whispers. It moved from bartender to taxi driver, passed between teenagers at bonfires, shared in hushed tones in dark corners of diners and smoke-filled bars. But for years, no one could definitively prove who she was, until someone went looking. Her name was Claire Maddox, a local journalist with a habit of chasing stories that everyone else had given up on. Not for the glory, not even for the bylines, but because, deep down, she believed that every myth had a seed of truth, and this one had haunted Chicago's South Side for too long. It all started when a police report crossed her desk, not a current one, a photocopy of a 1953 witness statement, scribbled in blue ink, yellowed at the corners. It described a woman in a white dress, barefoot, seen walking near Archer Avenue. The officer who filed it noted, "Subject vanished at cemetery gates. No follow-up needed." Locals claim this happens every year. Claire raised an eyebrow. The phrasing was casual, too casual. So she began to dig. Her first stop was the Chicago Tribune archives. She requested access to their microfilm reels from the early 1900s through the 1950s, narrowing her focus to anything involving women, car accidents, and Archer Avenue. She spent hours in the dim basement of the library, eyes squinting against the glow of the machine, scrolling through decades of forgotten tragedies. And then she found it. March 11, 1930 for front page. Young woman killed in auto accident after dance. Mary E. Bregovy, 21, was struck by a vehicle late Saturday night after leaving the O'Henry Ballroom in Willow Springs. Witnesses say she had left the dance early and was walking alone along Archer Avenue. Authorities have ruled the death accidental. Driver fled the scene. Claire sat back, heart thudding. Mary, Archer Avenue, the O'Henry Ballroom. All of it matched the legend. She printed a copy of the article and began tracing the trail further. She learned that Mary Bregovy was the daughter of Polish immigrants. Her family lived in the South Side. Her father worked at the stockyards, and Mary worked part-time at a bank. She loved to dance. That was what everyone said about her. She moved like she was weightless. One old neighbor remembered in a taped interview from the 1970s. Claire found the family listed in a 1930 census report. She found Mary's obituary simple, brief, and then she found the burial record. Burial location, Resurrection Cemetery, Plot 37A. Claire sat frozen at her desk, reading the name over and over again. It was her. It had to be. But Claire didn't stop there. She filed a request with the city records office and, within 2 weeks, was granted access to the original death certificate. It was dated March 12, 1934. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head and chest, consistent with vehicular impact. The driver was never identified. No arrests were made. No leads. Mary was pronounced dead just a few hundred feet from the gates of the cemetery, where she was now buried, where she was now seen. Claire felt the skin on her arms prickle, but something didn't make sense. The legend claimed she was returning to the cemetery when people saw her, but the report said she was struck before she reached it. So why, decades later, did her spirit always ask to be dropped at the gates? Claire spoke to a professor of folklore at the University of Illinois. Leonard Grayho specialized in ghost stories, urban legends, and oral history. She asked him directly, why would a ghost repeat that kind of route? Why the same pattern, over and over? Dr. Gray leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. It's called a residual haunting, he explained. A soul caught in a loop. If the death was traumatic, sudden, violent, it can leave an imprint, like a needle stuck in the same groove of a vinyl record. Claire nodded slowly. But there's more to this, Dr. Gray added. Mary's story isn't just residual. People say she speaks, interacts, that makes it different. Intelligent hauntings, we call them. He looked at her over the rim of his glasses. If that's true, Mary isn't just stuck. She's searching. Back in her office, Claire created a Philelabeldet project, Resurrection. She filled it with photos, clippings, notes, and copies of driver testimonials. She documented details no one had previously connected. The time of year when sightings spiked. March to May, the weather conditions foggy or rainy nights, and even the style of dress witnesses described: lace sleeves, satin skirt, modest neckline consist with 1930s fashion. Claire also found a photograph of Mary. It had been published in a church newsletter, barely visible, but it was her. The same dark curls, the same soft expression, the same sad eyes. She stared at it for a long time, then pinned it to the board above her desk. Who were you really? She whispered. One cold April evening, Claire did what few dared. She visited Resurrection Cemetery alone. She found Mary's grave. Plot 37A. The headstone was simple. Mary Bregovy, 19,131,934. She danced through life. There were faded flowers at the base, and beside them something strange. A single white ballet flat, old, worn, placed gently on the grass. Claire knelt down beside it, heart thudding. Was it a gift, an offering, a prank, or had someone else, another witness, left it there in silence? She didn't know, but something about it felt deeply personal, like a message. She set her recorder on the ground and spoke softly. "Mary, if you're still out here, I want to tell your story. I want to help people understand." Silence. Then the wind picked up, and a faint whisper, almost a hum. Claire blinked back a tear. "I believe you existed," she whispered. "And I believe you deserve to be remembered for more than just a ghost story." She stayed there for a long time. Long enough for the streetlights to flicker on. Long enough for the shadows to shift. Claire published her article 2 weeks later. The headline read, "The Girl in White, Uncovering the True Identity of Resurrection Mary." It detailed everything: Mary's life, her death, her burial, and the decades of sightings. She didn't sensationalize. She didn't embellish. She simply told the truth, with respect, with care, and with one question left unanswered at the end. If Mary is truly still walking, what is she waiting for? The article went viral. Locals shared their stories. Newspapers reprinted her work. And slowly, the myth of Resurrection Mary transformed from a spooky urban legend into a tragic memory that finally had a name, a face, and a history. Some still didn't believe. They said the story was a coincidence, that it wasn't the Mary, that ghosts weren't real. But others knew. They felt it. They had seen her eyes in their rearview mirrors, heard her voice when no one else was around. And now, thanks to Claire, the city remembered. She wasn't just a ghost anymore. She was Mary E. Bregevi. That night, Claire sat alone in her apartment, rereading the comments and messages from readers. She sipped coffee, tried to relax, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was nearby. She stood and walked to her window. Across the street, under a flickering lamppost, a figure stood, dressed in white, barefoot. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She blinked. Gone. She stared at the empty sidewalk. Then, slowly, she whispered, "Thank you." And in the distance, the wind carried a single note, like a song, or the echo of a girl who once danced her way into legend and refused to be forgotten. The dance hall connection. It always began with the music. Soft, melancholic, a waltz or a swing tune from a bygone era. The kind of song that made your feet move before your mind caught up. The kind of music that wrapped itself around memory and wouldn't let go. And when it played especially late at night, people saw her. Not just along Archer Avenue. Not just at the cemetery gates. But inside the old dance hall. The O'Henry Ballroom. Or what was left of it. Though it hadn't hosted a real dance in decades, the building still stood. About 3 miles from Resurrection Cemetery. Locals now called it the Willow Springs Banquet Hall, a shadow of its former self. Most who walked its floors now did so at wedding receptions or retirement parties. But those who stayed behind after midnight, some of them told a different story. Claire Maddox had heard the rumors before, but now, with her article gaining attention, more and more people were coming forward, afraid, or both. The first was a janitor named Danny Ruiz, who'd worked there for over 20 years. He didn't believe in ghosts. Not at first, but what he saw changed that. He met Claire at the hall one cloudy afternoon, letting her into the back entrance through a side door that still smelled faintly of mildew and old wood polish. "I don't like talking about this," Danny said. "People think I'm crazy." Claire replied gently, "I believe you. I just want to hear what happened." Danny walked her through the long, dusty corridors of the building. They passed faded wallpaper, cracked tile floors, and a dark, empty dance floor still surrounded by a low stage and ancient string lights. "This place had life once," he murmured. "They say Mary loved it here." Then he pointed to the far end of the room near a battered jukebox. "That's where I saw her, more than once." Claire turned on her recorder. "Tell me everything." Danny nodded. "It was always the same, late. Past midnight. Place would be empty, no parties, no guests. I'd be mopping the floors, thinking about going home." He paused, eyes drifting to the spot again. "Then I'd hear it. Music. But not from the speakers. Old-time music. Real old. Glenn Miller stuff. Or Benny Goodman." Claire nodded. "Swing era." Danny continued. "And when I'd look up, she'd be there." He swallowed. "Just one girl. White dress. Hair curled like they used to wear it. And she'd be dancing." "Alone?" Claire asked. Danny nodded slowly. "Always alone. She didn't just sway or spin. She danced with precision. Grace, as if following a partner no one else could see. And her expression," Danny remembered it vividly, "was not joyful. It was sad, focused, almost haunted." "Then," he said, "as soon as the song ended, poof, she'd vanish, right there. Mid-spin, sometimes. Like she was never real." Claire asked him, "Did she ever see you?" Danny hesitated. "The second time, yes, she looked at me, only for a second. And her eyes." He stopped talking, the words caught in his throat. Claire gently encouraged him. "What about her eyes?" He whispered, "They were asking for help." Claire later met with another witness, Rosaline Pierce, now in her 70s, who had once worked coat check at the ballroom back in the late 1950s. They met in Rosalind's kitchen, over tea and cinnamon cookies. "Oh yes, I remember Mary," Rosalind said with a small smile. "She was the girl in white." Claire leaned forward. "You saw her?" "Twice, but I wasn't the only one. Everyone knew about her back then. Dancers would whisper about the girl who disappears. We all thought it was just a story, until I saw her myself." Rosalind described the same pattern: late-night sightings, vintage music from nowhere, and a girl who danced alone and vanished without a trace. One night, Rosalind followed the sound of music and found the ballroom empty except for Mary. She was spinning under the chandelier, eyes closed. Her feet didn't even make a sound, like she wasn't touching the floor. Claire asked, "Did anyone else see it?" "I called for the manager, but when we got back she was gone." Rosalind took a deep breath. "I never doubted it after that, never." Claire pieced the accounts together in her notebook. A pattern. Mary was often seen between 1 and 3 a.m. She only appeared when old dance music played often, without any apparent source. She never spoke in the ballroom, but sometimes made eye contact, and she always vanished mid-song. It was as if her spirit was locked in the moment of a memory, living the last joy she ever knew. Claire visited the local records office again and found more documents about the O'Henry Ballroom. Built in 1923, it had once been the most elegant dance venue in the southwest suburbs. Hundreds came every weekend, live big bands, champagne, high heels and velvet gloves. Mary, according to surviving photos, had loved to dance. Multiple friends had confirmed she frequented the ballroom weekly before her death. In fact, on the night she died, she had attended a Saturday dance there, leaving early after an argument with a boyfriend. A cold night, a foggy road, and one final walk down Archer Avenue. Claire circled the date on her notes. March 10, 1934. The night the music stopped. Then, something strange happened. One evening, Claire returned to the ballroom alone. She asked for permission to walk the floor after hours purely for research. The owner, a skeptical man named Curtis, allowed it. "I don't believe in ghosts," he said, "but I believe in curiosity. Just don't break anything." Claire smiled and stepped onto the dance floor. It was quiet, still. Dusty light filtered in through the stained glass windows. The room smelled of time and polish. She took a few slow steps to the center. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered it. Only static. Then faint music. A swing melody. Old, scratchy. She dropped the phone. But the music continued. And that's when she saw it. Her. Just for a moment. Near the jukebox. Mary. Spinning. Graceful. Eyes closed. Lips barely parted as if whispering words to a song no one else could hear. Then the music stopped. And Mary vanished. Claire stood frozen. Her phone still buzzed at her feet. When she picked it up again, the call had ended. No number saved. No voicemail. No trace. Claire documented the experience the next day. She didn't tell anyone it yet. But in her private journal, she wrote, "I saw her. Not a shadow. Not a trick. She was real. She was beautiful. And she was breaking." Claire began to wonder, was Mary's spirit really trapped in her final walk? Or was she waiting for someone to return? A dance never finished. A promise never kept. Later that week, another witness came forward Samin knew. James Rourke, age 89, former musician. He had once played trumpet in the ballroom in 1951. "I played for her," he said, matter of fact. Claire asked what he meant. She requested a song. "One night, I was closing down, just me and the piano player. She approached young woman in white. Looked like she stepped out of a different decade. Asked for Stardust by Hoagy Carmichael." Claire's pen froze. She said it was their song. James looked off into the distance. "We started to play. She danced, alone, no one else there. But I swear, I felt like someone else was dancing with her. Something in the air changed. The way the lights flickered, the echo in the room, and when the song ended, he exhaled slowly. She faded, right in front of me. I never forgot her." Claire returned home that night and played Stardust on her record player. The old melody drifted through the air melancholy and sweet, and as it played, she stood alone in her apartment, eyes closed. She imagined Mary in that ballroom, spinning, smiling, heartbroken, still waiting for a partner who never came back, and maybe, just maybe, still hoping he will. Footprints in the gate. The Resurrection Cemetery had long been a place of mystery and quiet reverence, but lately it had become something else, a focal point for strange, unexplained events that even the most skeptical workers couldn't ignore. Jake and Claire both heard about it first from a frantic phone call. It was from one of the cemetery's maintenance supervisors, a man named Frank. "Jake, you need to get down here," Frank had said, his voice trembling. "Something's happened at the gates. You won't believe it." Curious and concerned, Jake and Claire met Frank at the cemetery one foggy morning. Frank led them along the gravel path toward the main entrance, towering iron gates that had stood there for over a century. As they approached, a strange, acrid smell hung in the air, like burnt metal and smoke. The first thing Jake noticed were the marks. Deep, darkened impressions scorched directly into the iron. Handprints. 2 of them, about the size of a young woman's hands. The iron was blistered and blackened around the edges, as if seared by an intense heat. Next to them, eerie footprints, the size of bare feet, were etched into the gateposts. The marks were not painted or drawn. They were burnt into the metal itself. Claire bent down to examine the gateposts. She pulled out a small magnifying glass from her bag and inspected the scorched footprints closely. "They're too precise," she murmured, almost like someone pressed their bare feet against the iron with incredible force. Frank chimed in. "We've had workers out here for years. No one's ever seen anything like this. No fireworks, no fires, no heat source that could have caused these burns." Jake ran his fingers over one of the handprints. It was cold to the touch but oddly textured, almost like the gate had been sealed with an invisible scorch mark. "Could this be connected to Mary?" Jake asked, the hairs on his neck standing up. Frank nodded slowly. "Most of us here think so. The night this was found, the fog was thick, and several workers reported hearing soft footsteps and whispered voices near the gates. One of them swore he saw a white figure standing just beyond the fence before it vanished. The local police came to investigate, but found no evidence of vandalism or fire. The fire department's heat sensors showed no unusual readings. Experts were baffled. Metallurgists examined the gate and confirmed the burns were not from any chemical or external agent, typically seen in arson. They speculated that some unknown energy might have caused the marks. But what kind of energy? Theories floated among the staff. Was it supernatural? Was it a sign? Or was the gate itself a kind of portal between worlds? The burned handprints and footprints soon became a symbol. Visitors left flowers near the gates. Some brought candles. Others left notes, prayers, and taconspel white flowers, a single ballet shoe, even an old vinyl record of swing music. One local artist painted a mural nearby depicting Mary in her white dress, her hands reaching toward the gate, the footprints leading into the shadows beyond. Jake and Claire stayed late that evening. They set up cameras, hoping to capture anything unusual. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the temperature began to drop sharply. A thick fog rolled in, swirling through the trees and creeping toward the gates, like a living thing. At exactly midnight, the cameras caught something remarkable. A faint glow shimmered around the burnt handprints. Slowly, the glow intensified, taking shape. A figure appeared, a woman in white, barefoot, standing just beyond the iron bars. She reached toward the gate, pressing her hands against the scorch marks. Her eyes were filled with longing and sorrow. And then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished. The next day, Jake reviewed the footage. He showed it to Claire and Frank. None of them could explain it. The cemetery workers reported more strange experiences. Lights flickered without cause. Footsteps echoed when no one was there, and a soft, haunting melody sometimes drifted on the wind, an old dance tune, echoing from a distant era. Claire returned to the university to consult with Dr. Leonard Gray. She shared the footage. He was visibly shaken. "This is unlike anything I've seen before," he said. "The physical marks on the gate suggest a powerful energy imprint, and the apparition indicates a conscious presence." He added, "Mary is not just trapped in a loop anymore. She's reaching out." The burnt marks became a rallying point for the community. People came to pay respects. Some claimed the gates seemed warmer near the handprints, as if Mary's spirit lingered there. Others reported dreams of dancing in a foggy ballroom, feeling the touch of unseen hands. One night, Jake and Claire decided to conduct a vigil. They invited locals, witnesses, and believers. At midnight, as fog enveloped the cemetery, they lit candles and shared stories. Then, together, they sang the old dance tune. The melody floated over the cemetery like a prayer. At the end, the burnt handprints glowed faintly, and for a moment, the air felt lighter. Jake looked up at the gates. The marks remained, silent, but alive. A reminder that some spirits leave more than memorials, they leave traces. A driver's confession. The city of Chicago had always been a crossroads of stories, some rooted in fact, others wrapped in myth. Among them, the tale of resurrection Mary stood out as one of the most enduring. Yet despite the countless sightings, no one had spoken so openly until now. His name was Tom Richards, a retired cab driver who had spent decades navigating the streets of Chicago. Tom had never been one for ghost stories or superstition, but the night he encountered Mary was burned into his memory, etched in a way that would never fade. Tom sat nervously across from Claire in a quiet diner near Archer Avenue. His hands trembled slightly as he cradled a steaming cup of black coffee. "I've kept this to myself for years," he said, voice low. "Didn't think anyone would believe me." Claire nodded, her recorder on the table between them. "I'm here to listen. Whatever happened, you can tell me." Tom took a deep breath and began. It was a cold November night in 1978. He was finishing his shift, driving along Archer Avenue on his way back to the cab depot. The fog had rolled in thick, the streetlights casting eerie halos through the mist. Suddenly, he saw her, a young woman dressed in white, standing by the roadside, barefoot, with dark curls falling over her shoulders. She looked so out of place, Tom recalled, like she didn't belong to this world. Instinctively, Tom slowed the cab and pulled over. "Need a ride?" he asked. She nodded silently and climbed into the back seat. From that moment on, Tom's world changed. The car grew cold, so cold that his breath fogged the windows. The heater stopped working. Her eyes never blinked. She didn't speak, only stared straight ahead. The radio crackled with static, then switched off completely. Tom tried to shake off the unease, focusing on the road. But something about her presence was wrong. As they neared Resurrection Cemetery, she suddenly spoke. "Stop here," she said softly, voice barely above a whisper. Tom pulled over near the iron gates. He glanced in the rearview mirror, but when he turned to look at her, she was gone. Vanished. No door opened. No footsteps. Nothing but the empty seat. Tom's heart pounded. He checked the back again and again. No sign of her. He rubbed his eyes, wondering if he'd fallen asleep. But the seat was icy cold. The smell of damp earth lingered in the air. Then, as he started driving away, Tom glanced in his rearview mirror. There she was, standing just beyond the gate, watching him. Her eyes locked with his for a moment. Then she disappeared into the mist. Tom pulled the cab over and sat frozen. He didn't say a word until he got home. For years, Tom refused to tell anyone. He feared ridicule. He feared being labeled crazy. But the memory haunted him. The cold, the silence, the way her eyes seemed to plead for help. Eventually, the story leaked out. His daughter overheard him telling a friend. She encouraged him to come forward. Now, sitting across from Claire, Tom felt a strange relief. "I just want people to know what I saw," he said. Claire pressed him gently. "Did you ever try to follow her, to find out who she was?" Tom shook his head. "No. Part of me was too scared. Part of me I think I didn't want to know." Tom described the nights that followed. Sometimes he thought he saw her in the corner of his eye, a flicker of white, a shadow in the fog. Other nights, the cab's radio would mysteriously turn on to an old jazz station he hadn't heard in years. He even found a white glove on his back seat once. Tom's confession added a new layer to the legend. Mary wasn't just a ghost who disappeared without a trace. She was a presence that lingered, a spirit reaching out. Claire asked if he ever spoke to other drivers about his experience. Tom nodded. "A few told me they'd seen her too. Same dress, same silence." As the interview ended, Tom looked out the window. "Maybe she's waiting for someone," he said quietly. "Someone who never came back." That night, Claire replayed Tom's story in her mind. The cold car, the vanishing act, the haunting stare. It was all too familiar, too real. She realized the story of Resurrection Mary was not just about a girl lost in time. It was about the countless souls who crossed paths with her, and the mystery that refused to fade. The rainy night incident. It was the kind of night where even the city seemed to shiver. Rain pounded the pavement in relentless sheets, drumming on rooftops, bouncing off windshields, and turning the streets of Chicago into glistening rivers of shadow and light. Thunder cracked like a war drum overhead, and each bolt of lightning lit up the skyline in flashes of ghostly white. Officer Daniel Brooks had worked the night shift for 13 years. He'd seen everything: robberies, car chases, desperate addicts, broken people doing desperate things. But what happened that night on Archer Avenue would remain the only incident. He never dared write into a report, and it started, like most stories involving her, with a girl in white. He was nearing the end of his patrol. 2:37 a.m. Wipers squeaking rhythmically across the windshield. The police cruiser's headlights barely pierced the storm, and static fuzzed through the radio like an unspoken warning. Then, just ahead, a flash of movement on the shoulder. A figure. He slowed. Standing in the rain was a young woman. Pale, soaked through, barefoot. Her white dress clung to her like mist on marble. Her hair was matted to her face. She raised one trembling hand. Daniel pulled the cruiser to the side of the road, lowered his window. "Miss, are you all right?" She didn't answer, just nodded and opened the back door. She climbed in without a word. Daniel glanced at her through the rearview mirror. She sat silently, hands in her lap, eyes focused forward. Even with the heater blasting, she didn't shiver. No ID, no name, nothing but that dress into presence that made the air feel heavy. Something about her unsettled him, but he shook it off. People got weird during storms. Maybe she'd been to a party. Maybe she'd run from something. He'd heard stranger stories. He clicked the mic. "Dispatch, I've picked up a possible 10 to 96. Female, mid-20s. Found alone on Archer. Taking her to Station 7 forever." He waited for confirmation, then glanced again at the mirror. She was gone. His heart skipped. He slammed on the brakes, turned around. Empty seat. No door opened. No wet footprints. No sound. Only silence. And the faintest trace of lavender perfume. Daniel stared into the mirror, breath fogging the glass. Then his radio crackled. "Unit 347. Repeat your last. Who did you say was in your vehicle?" He didn't respond. He couldn't. He pulled the cruiser into the cemetery's shoulder and got out. Nothing. Just the rain, the iron gates of Resurrection Cemetery, and the sound of thunder crawling across the sky. His hands trembled. He looked to the rear seat again. Dry. Utterly dry. As if she had never been there. The next day, he reviewed the cruiser's dashcam and rear cabin footage. He saw himself pull over. He saw the car stop, the door open. But the rear cam? It showed nothing. No one standing by the road. No one entering the car. Just the door, opening on its own, and closing. The department chalked it up to malfunction. But Daniel knew better. He'd felt her, smelled the perfume. He remembered her face. The rain had soaked her to the bone, but she had no mud on her feet. No fear in her eyes. Only sadness. A heavy, ancient sorrow. He never reported the full story. But word got around. Other officers began sharing quiet confessions in locker rooms, patrol cars, and bar booths. "She's out there," they whispered. "White dress, doesn't speak, vanishes." Each sighting near Archer Avenue. Each witness filled with the same uneasy wonder. Claire learned about Daniel's incident through a retired dispatcher, who still haunted the fringes of police gatherings. The story had stuck with her, particularly the footage. Claire tracked Daniel down and arranged a private interview. He was reluctant, but eventually he agreed. They met in a small cafe near the precinct. "I didn't believe in ghosts," he said. "Still not sure I do. But that night, something was in my car, something real." He showed her the footage. She watched the door open, pause, and close. Silently. No figure, no shadow, nothing to explain the pressure sensor triggering the cabin lights. Claire asked him what he felt at that moment. He answered simply, "Like I was being watched by someone who didn't want to be forgotten." Daniel's story wasn't alone. Other patrol officers, past and present, came forward, some anonymously sharing reports of brief sightings, radio interference, sudden cold spots in their cruisers, and that unmistakable flash of white just past the edges of their headlights. Every time it happened, near Resurrection Cemetery, always during rain, always after midnight. Claire gathered the testimonies, aligning them by date, weather, and lunar phase. Patterns emerged. Most incidents occurred during storms. Most officers felt compelled to stoke than those who swore afterward that they didn't see anyone. It was as if Mary's spirit reached inside the mind, pushing just enough to draw help, then retreating. But why? Why appear in the rain? Why enter police vehicles? Why vanish just as silently as she came? Was it a plea or punishment? Claire returned to the cemetery with Jake. The sky had turned gray, clouds swelling overhead. As the first drops fell, they stood before the gates again. Jake looked uneasy. This place feels different in the rain. Claire nodded. She turned on her recorder. Mary, if you're still here, she said into the mist. Why do you reach out like this? What are you trying to show us? Lightning flashed behind the trees. A low rumble of thunder followed. Then nothing. Only the sound of raindrops on metal and leaves. They turned to leave, but Claire paused. For just a moment, she thought she saw a figure behind the gate. Not moving, just standing. A girl in white, barefoot, hair dripping wet. She blinked and the figure was gone. Later that night, Claire listened to her recording. Her voice echoed through the static. Then, behind her question, a faint whisper, barely audible. One word, help. She played it again, and again. Each time, the voice was there. Feminine, desperate. A whisper threaded through storm and silence. The rainy night incident had given them more than evidence. It had given Mary a voice. Just one word. But it was enough. Claire leaned back in her chair, staring at the waveform on her screen. She thought of the cab driver who saw her, the ballroom where she danced alone, the burned handprints at the gate, and now this, a ghost that entered a squad car during a storm, left no trace, and whispered through the static of time. Mary wasn't a myth anymore. She was real, and she was still out there, still searching, still hoping, still calling out from the rain-soaked shadows of Archer Avenue. The gravedigger's warning. The first time Jonas Bell saw her, it was just before sunrise. The fog had settled over Resurrection Cemetery like a heavy blanket. Not unusual for late October. Cold clung to the ground, and dew gathered on marble crosses like tears. Jonas, a gravedigger by trade, had worked here for over 40 years. He'd seen weather come and go, seen mourners cry and sometimes scream. He had grown used to sorrow, even to silence, but not to this, not to her. It started like any other morning. He was prepping a plot near the southern tree line plot to 148. Section 6. He wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned against his shovel, catching his breath as a chill wind blew through the branches overhead. And then he saw her, a girl in white, kneeling, not on a grave, but in the space between headstones where no one had been buried for decades. She had her head bowed, long dark curls cascading over her face, and she was weeping. Jonas froze. She didn't make a sound, not a sob, not a gasp, but her shoulders trembled with each breath, and her fingers clutched the grass as if trying to cling to something beneath it. He approached slowly. "Miss," he called gently, "are you all right?" She didn't move. Not at first. Then, ever so slightly, she turned her head, and Jonas felt his heart stop. Her eyes were wide and full of sorrow, black and glistening like storm clouds. Her skin was pale, her lips blue with cold. She stared at him for a moment. Then she stood, and vanished into mist. Jonas never forgot that moment, not just because she disappeared but because of what happened after. As the mist settled, the earth where she had been kneeling sank, just a little, as if something beneath it had shifted, or awakened. Later, Jonas checked the cemetery records. That patch of grass, it wasn't just any spot. It was the unmarked grave of a girl buried in 1934. No stone, no family plot, just a name in the old ledgers. Mary Bregovy. That same day, Jonas requested a meeting with the cemetery's supervisor. He told them what he'd seen. He expected laughter. Instead, the supervisor went pale. "You're not the first," she whispered. That night, Jonas sat in the cemetery's maintenance shed and pulled out a worn leather notebook. In it, he documented every strange thing he'd witnessed over the years. Footsteps behind him with no source. The sound of distant music playing between the gravestones. Cold spots that lingered even on summer afternoons. And always, the girl in white. He kept his silence for years, until Claire came looking. She had heard whispers about the gravedigger who saw the ghost, and after tracking him down through cemetery staff, she finally sat with him beneath a weeping willow. Jonas was older, no gray-haired, heavy-set, and weathered from time, but his eyes still held the fire of memory. "I didn't want to believe it," he said, "but I know what I saw." Claire leaned in. "Tell me everything." Jonas recounted that morning in vivid detail. The fog, the silence, the girl, and the way she vanished like breath on glass. Claire listened, heart pounding. Then he added something else. "She comes back, always to the same spot." Claire blinked. "You've seen her again?" He nodded. "At least for times over the last 20 years, always around the same date." She pulled out her notebook. "What date?" "March 10th. Claire's pen paused. "That was the night Mary reportedly died in 1934. After a dance, after an argument, after disappearing along Archer Avenue." Claire asked what she was doing when he saw her on those nights. "Same thing," Jonas replied, "kneeling, weeping. Sometimes she reached for the ground. Once, she whispered something he couldn't quite hear. Another time, she was holding a white rose." Claire asked the obvious question. "Why do you think she comes back here?" Jonas didn't answer at first. Then he looked out at the cemetery and said something that chilled her. "Because this place isn't just where she's buried. It's where she's still trapped." They walked to the unmarked spot together. Claire stood over the earth, noting how the grass here was always damp heaven in dry weather, how the fog seemed to hang low over it. She knelt down and placed her hand on the ground. Cold, colder than anything she'd felt before. It was like touching the void. Claire asked if anyone had ever tried to place a marker there. Jonas shook his head. No family left, no one claimed the grave. Just a record in an old book. She stood up, her mind racing. "She deserves a name." Jonas nodded. "And peace." The next morning, Claire filed a petition with the cemetery to install a small, temporary plaque. Nothing fancy, just a name. Mary Bregovy 19161934. Below it, a simple inscription. "Still dancing." They placed it in the ground 2 days later. Jonas said the air felt lighter that afternoon. Claire agreed, but the peace didn't last long. 1 week later, a groundskeeper reported something strange. The plaque had vanished. No sign of damage. No footprints. No disturbance in the soil. Just gone. Claire and Jonas checked the area. The grass had grown wild overnight, and faint footprints barefoot, small from the spot to the cemetery gates. Claire reviewed the cemetery's security footage. It was grainy, unfocused, but between 3 o'clock and 3:02 a.m., the camera facing the south section caught a shadowy figure kneeling at the unmarked grave. At 3:03, the figure stood. At 3:04, it was gone, and the plaque with it. Jonas gave Claire a warning before she left. "Be careful," he said. "You're getting close to something, and sometimes, the dead don't want to be remembered." She stared at him. "I think Mary does." He shook his head. "No, I think someone else doesn't." That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Marek kneeling, crying, dissolving into fog. Why that grave? Why March 10th? Why remove the plaque? The questions spiraled like the wind outside. She reached for her recorder and whispered into it. "This isn't just a haunting. This is a wound that hasn't healed. A name erased, a memory silenced. But she keeps coming back, because something was left unfinished." As she drifted into uneasy sleep, a new question formed. What if Mary wasn't weeping for herself? What if she was mourning someone else? And who had buried her in an unmarked grave? Who had tried to make her disappear? Claire opened her eyes. A storm was coming, and Mary was still waiting. A psychic's vision. Claire hadn't planned to contact a psychic. Not at first. She had built her reputation on research, interviews, and verified documents. She trusted eyewitnesses, timelines, and historical evidence. The paranormal, for her, was best explored through the lens of logic. But Resurrection Mary wasn't logical. She was persistent, real, impossible to ignore. And now, after gravediggers, dash cams, burned gates, whispered voices, and disappearing plaques, Claire was desperate for answers. So when someone handed her a business card that simply read, Evelyn Wren, medium and spiritual conduit, with a phone number and no other details, she didn't hesitate. She made the call. Evelyn met her 2 days later at Resurrection Cemetery. She was not what Claire expected. No flowing robes, no glowing crystals, just a woman in her late 40s, wearing a gray coat and calm eyes that seemed to see far beyond the surface of things. They stood together by the unmarked grave where Mary had once knelt and wept. Evelyn didn't speak at first. She closed her eyes. The wind picked up, and then, almost inaudibly, she whispered, "She's still walking." Claire watched her closely. Evelyn slowly lowered herself to the ground, palms resting lightly on the cold earth. "She's stuck," she said. "I can feel it. It's like a loop, a memory she can't escape." Claire knelt beside her. "Can you see it?" Evelyn nodded. "I can feel her pain, her confusion, her final steps." She inhaled deeply. She doesn't understand what happened. She just remembers walking. Cold, hurt, something. Unfinished. She's trying to get home, but she never makes it. Claire felt a chill race down her spine. Why this spot? Evelyn opened her eyes. She died nearby. This was the last place she thought of before the end. It became her anchor. Evelyn stood, brushing off her hands. But that's not all. Claire's heart pounded. What else? Evelyn turned toward the road beyond the gate. She's not alone. Those 3 words froze the blood in Claire's veins. Not alone. Evelyn nodded slowly. There's a shadow, something behind her, something watching. Claire tried to speak, but her mouth went dry. Evelyn continued, her voice almost trance-like. "It's not malicious, but it's not peaceful either. It's like it doesn't want her to move on. It keeps her in the loop, holds her in the memory." Claire asked, "Is it a person, a spirit?" Evelyn shook her head. "It's older than that. Maybe not even human. Maybe just a memory with weight. A place that remembers pain." They walked together down Archer Avenue, following the route Mary might have taken that final night. Evelyn moved slowly, sometimes pausing as if hearing something no one else could. She was barefoot, Evelyn said suddenly. She ran for a while, not from fear, but from heartbreak. Something happened at the dance. Claire opened her notebook. She had a fight with her boyfriend. Witnesses said she left upset. Alone. Evelyn nodded. "I see her walking fast, rain, or maybe just cold. Lights behind her, a car." She stopped, eyes wide. Claire stepped closer. "What do you see?" Evelyn whispered, "A crash." The word lingered in the air. Claire had heard rumors before that Mary might have been hit by a car, but no records ever confirmed it. Just speculation. Evelyn continued. "She didn't die instantly. She tried to get up, tried to walk again. She didn't know she was already gone." Claire swallowed hard. "And now she walks the same path over and over." Evelyn nodded. "Because that's the last thing she remembers. The last thing she believed. I have to get home." They reached a spot near the gates where many drivers claimed to have seen her vanish. Evelyn paused. "She always stops here," she said. "This is where her spirit turns around. Because the road ends. But her memory doesn't." Claire asked, "Can she be released?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. Then she knelt again, pressing one hand to the ground. She needs to know she's remembered, that her story has meaning. She's not angry. She's lost. Claire felt tears rising unexpectedly. After all this time, Mary wasn't a warning or a curse. She was just a girl trying to get home. That night, Evelyn returned to the cemetery alone. Claire waited nearby, out of sight, letting the medium do what she came to do. Evelyn lit a single candle. She placed it where Mary had once knelt. She whispered prayers not of exorcism or force, but of peace, of permission. "You can rest now," Evelyn whispered. "You're not forgotten. You are seen. You are loved." The candle flickered. Then the fog rolled in again. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt soft. The next morning, Claire visited the spot again. The candle had burned down completely, and near the patch of grass, faint impressions remained. Bare footprints, leading away from the grave, toward the gate. And this time, beyond it, Claire published a new article, "Resurrection Mary, the Girl Still Walking." It included quotes from Jonas the Gravedigger, Officer Brooks, Tom the cab driver, and now Evelyn the psychic. She ended the piece with a line that echoed across social media and radio stations for weeks. "Mary isn't a ghost story. She's a memory made visibly soul walking home through time, waiting for someone to say, 'You mattered.'" Soon after, someone anonymously donated funds to place a permanent headstone for Mary. It was simple, elegant. "Mary Bregevi 19161934. Beloved daughter, still dancing." The cemetery approved the marker. This time, no one removed it. And Claire noticed something else. The reports began to slow. Fewer sightings. No new dashcam footage. No sudden cold spots. Even the gates remained untouched. It was as if something had shifted. As if Mary had heard. And perhaps for the first time in nearly a century, she was at peace. But one final moment remained. Claire met with Evelyn one last time. They sat by the new headstone in silence. Then Evelyn said, "There's something else." Claire turned. She left a message. What kind of message? Evelyn closed her eyes. She said, "Thank you. I'm not walking alone anymore." Claire didn't respond. She simply placed a single white rose at the grave and walked away, not alone, but with the weight of a soul finally released, trying to help her move on. The story of resurrection Mary had captured the hearts and minds of Chicago's residents for decades. Now, after Claire's article and Evelyn's psychic vision, the city's curiosity turned to compassion. People wanted to help. If Mary was truly a lost soul, trapped in a loop of sorrow and confusion, then maybe the community could give her something she'd never had before: peace. On a crisp autumn evening, a group gathered near Resurrection Cemetery's gates. They came from all walks of life: priests, spiritualists, historians, locals, and those simply drawn by the legend. Their plan was simple: to hold a vigil, a ceremony to honor Mary's memory and send her spirit a message of love and release. Among them was Father Michael Donovan, a priest known for his open mind and gentle demeanor. He had read the articles and listened to the testimonies. He believed that faith and community could bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Father Michael began the ceremony with a prayer. He spoke of forgiveness, of letting go, and of welcoming the departed into eternal light. The crowd lit candles and placed white roses on the ground. Soft music played in the background, an old jazz tune said to be Mary's favorite. As the vigil progressed, participants shared their stories. Some recalled fleeting glimpses of Mary on foggy nights. Others spoke of strange sensations: cold drafts, whispered names, fleeting shadows. Many expressed hope that the ritual would finally release her. But as the night deepened, something unexpected happened. A sudden gust swept through the gathering. Candles flickered wildly. The music warped into eerie echoes. A chill settled over the crowd. Suddenly, a figure appeared near the cemetery gates. A woman in white, barefoot, her dark hair dripping wet. She raised a hand as if to wave, then vanished. Gasps filled the air. Some reached for their candles, others whispered prayers. Father Michael stepped forward. "She is here," he said quietly. Let us not fear. Let us offer our hearts. The vigil continued long into the night. Prayers, chants, and songs filled the space. Many claimed to feel a warmth and unseen presence among them. Despite the ritual's intentions, sightings of Mary did not cease. In fact, in the weeks that followed, reports increased. Drivers on Archer Avenue swore they saw her hitchhiking. Cemetery workers heard footsteps and soft sobbing near her grave. Late-night callers reported whispering voices. Claire returned to the cemetery to investigate. She spoke to locals, compiling new testimonies. The more people tried to help, the more Mary seemed to manifest. It was as if the spirit was reaching out, desperate for connection. One evening, Claire met with Father Michael again. They discussed the paradox. Sometimes, he said, when spirits are deeply unsettled, rituals can awaken memories and pain instead of easing them. Claire nodded. Mary may be trying to tell us something more. Determined to understand, Claire and Father Michael organized a series of community meetings. They invited psychics, historians, and those with personal experiences. Together, they sought ways to truly help Mary move on. At one meeting, Evelyn Wren returned. She shared a vision she'd had during a recent meditation. "In my vision," she said, "Mary is not just lost. She's bound by guilt and fear. There's someone she fears will be left behind if she disappears." Claire leaned forward. "Who?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "I don't know, but the feeling is strong, like a promise unkept." That night, Claire researched old newspapers and court records. She found mentions of a mysterious accident near Archer Avenue in 1934. A hit-and-run that was never solved. Victim's name, Mary Bregovy. No suspect ever found. Claire shared the findings with the group. "It seems Mary's spirit may be tethered to a promise of justice." Father Michael added, "Perhaps her spirit waits for the truth to be revealed." Inspired, the community launched a new effort to uncover the story behind the accident. Locals scoured archives, interviewed descendants, and dug through forgotten records. Months passed. New clues emerged. A faded photograph showed Mary dancing with a man. A diary entry hinted at a secret. Witnesses recalled a shadowy figure fleeing the scene. The search became a collective mission. The legend of Resurrection Mary transformed from a ghost story into a quest for closure. Yet, through it all, Mary's presence lingered. Her appearances became less about fright and more about longing. Some nights, she was seen standing quietly by the gates, looking toward the horizon. Others, she was caught on camera dancing softly beneath the moonlight. Claire realized that Mary's spirit was evolving. No longer trapped in fear, she seemed to be waiting for what no one yet knew. One evening, Father Michael led a special prayer service at the cemetery. He spoke directly to Mary's spirit. "Mary," he said, voice steady and warm, "your story has been heard, your pain acknowledged. When you are ready, we will walk with you into the light." The group sang hymns. Candles flickered in the wind, and for a fleeting moment, the air shimmered. A soft breeze carried the scent of jasmine. As the ceremony ended, a young woman approached Claire, her eyes bright with emotion. "My grandmother always told me about Mary," she said. "She said Mary needed to forgive herself." Claire smiled gently. "That may be the key." The community agreed to continue their support not through fear or rituals but through remembrance and compassion. A small memorial garden was planned near the cemetery, with flowers, benches, and a plaque honoring Mary's memory. Months later, as the garden bloomed, sightings of Mary grew rare. The fog no longer seemed oppressive. The cold spots faded. The haunting melodies quieted. One last time, Claire visited the garden at dusk. She placed a white rose on the plaque. The wind stirred the leaves, and in the fading light, she thought she saw a faint silhouette smiling. Mary's story was not over, but for the first time, it felt like a beginning, a promise that even the lost can find their way home. The final ride. In the age of smartphones and constant connection, nothing stays hidden for long. Stories spread faster than ever, and encounters once whispered around campfires now live streamed to thousands of viewers. That's how the legend of Resurrection Mary found a new chapter. Ethan Carter was a rideshare driver in Chicago. In his mid-20s, Ethan had a knack for storytelling and a small but growing following on social media. He often live-streamed his rides, sharing everything from cityscapes to candid conversations with passengers. On a foggy October night, Ethan's stream went viral. He was cruising down Archer Avenue around midnight, headlights slicing through the mist. The rain had just stopped, leaving the streets slick and shimmering. Ethan was scrolling through his ride requests when he saw her, a young woman standing at the roadside. White dress, barefoot, hair dark and dripping. She looked right at his car as he slowed. "Hey, can I give you a ride?" Ethan asked, rolling down the window. She nodded and opened the back door. Ethan's phone continued streaming. His viewers saw everything. As she settled in, Ethan noticed the air turn cold. His breath fogged on the windshield. She never spoke, never blinked, her eyes fixed ahead, pale and distant. Ethan tried to make conversation. "Where to?" No answer. He glanced in the rearview mirror. She was gone. Viewers gasped. Some thought it was a prank. Others believed. Ethan checked his rear seats. Empty. No wet footprints. No sign she had ever been there. He slowed, heart pounding. His dashcam recorded everything. He pulled over near Resurrection Cemetery's gates. Suddenly, the live chat exploded. Viewers claimed they saw a faint figure in the back seat. A silhouette. A shimmer. The face of a girl. Ethan replayed the footage after ending the stream. There, faint but clear on the screen, was Mary. Not visible to the naked eye, but caught on camera. Over the next few days, the video spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up the story. Skeptics debated. Experts analyzed the footage. Some said it was a digital glitch. Others argued it was evidence of a lingering spirit. Ethan became an overnight sensation. He received calls from paranormal investigators, historians, and believers. They wanted to know more. Ethan decided to return to Archer Avenue with Claire and Father Michael. They hoped to understand what had happened. Together, they retraced Mary's steps. The rain started again, cold and steady. Ethan turned on his dashcam. As they passed the cemetery gates, Ethan's phone glitched. The screen flickered. For a moment, the figure appeared again. Claire whispered, "She's still with us." Father Michael nodded. Not all spirits are ready to leave. They stopped near the memorial garden. Ethan showed them the live stream. "Mary wants to be seen," Claire said softly. "She's reaching out through our stories and memories." The group held a moment of silence. Then Father Michael spoke a final prayer. A prayer for peace. Ethan felt a warmth spread through the car. The air grew still. The fog lifted. As they drove away, Ethan glanced in the mirror. A faint smile appeared. A last farewell. The legend of Resurrection Mary lives on. In stories, memories, and the hearts of those who remember.